In the heart of West Africa, beyond the golden sands of the Sahara and the rugged stretches of the Sahel, stands Burkina Faso, a nation long invisible on the global stage and known more for its struggles than triumphs, where scarce resources, harsh climates, and limited infrastructure left millions without electricity, studying by candlelight, cooking over smoky fires, and suffering in powerless hospitals. Yet today, this forgotten country is writing a bold new chapter with an $800 billion hydroelectric project that aims not only to generate power, but to redefine Africa's independence and global influence. Led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young military leader who rose to power in 2022 and refuses to see his nation condemned to weakness, declaring instead that energy is about sovereignty and dignity, not just light bulbs and machines. And despite global critics dismissing the project as absurd for one of Africa's poorest countries, Traoré's vision has turned the mighty Mouhoun River into the centerpiece of an ambitious plan to build 11 interconnected hydroelectric dams linked by a smart grid, capable of delivering clean energy to 400 million people across 15 nations, transforming schools, hospitals, farms, factories, and villages by bringing electricity as a right, not a privilege, and breaking free from a history of poverty, drought, colonial exploitation, and political instability that left Burkina Faso dependent on foreign aid and agendas. For Traoré understands that electricity powers not just homes, but destiny itself. And with advanced AI-driven systems, renewable integration, and partnerships with emerging economies like Cuba, Iran, and Brazil, who train local engineers and workers, the project becomes a declaration of independence, proving that Africa can export innovation instead of raw materials. And as massive dams rise along the Mouhoun and workers carve foundations into the earth, Burkina Faso stands at the edge of transformation, showing the world that even a small, overlooked nation can spark revolutions. And in the glowing eyes of children seeing electric light for the first time, the story of Burkina Faso is no longer despair but power, resilience, and hope. The $800 billion hydroelectric project at the heart of Burkina Faso's transformation is more than a construction plan. It is a monumental statement of vision and ambition, and for a nation that once struggled to keep its lights on, the idea of creating one of the largest energy networks in the world seemed unthinkable. Yet under Captain Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, it is slowly becoming reality. With the Mouhoun River reimagined as the backbone of a clean energy revolution, through 11 massive dams engineered to withstand the region's harsh terrain while using advanced turbines, generators, and water management systems to produce electricity that flows into a groundbreaking smart grid capable of balancing demand across 15 nations in real time, powered by artificial intelligence to anticipate needs, store surplus, and integrate renewables so that for the first time West Africa can operate as a unified energy zone, transforming daily life by bringing light to homes, safe power to hospitals, irrigation to farms, opportunity to small businesses, growth to industries, and digital access to remote villages, while also creating over 1.5 million jobs with a focus on training Burkinabe citizens instead of outsourcing, building national pride as young men and women become skilled engineers and technicians, supported by partnerships with countries like Cuba, Brazil, and Iran, all of which defy the skepticism of critics who dismissed the $800 billion figure as impossible for a country with a GDP of only $20 billion, not realizing that this is structured as a long-term investment through resource-backed deals and regional commitments, and as dams rise, grids connect, and turbines begin to spin. The world sees that this is no longer just a dream, but a powerful act of defiance, rewriting Africa's narrative from extraction and dependence to innovation and sovereignty, with every watt of electricity and every glowing light across Burkina Faso, declaring that Africa will build its own future. When a nation builds dams, it does more than generate electricity, it reshapes its entire economy. And in the case of Burkina Faso, the $800 billion hydroelectric project is already acting as an engine of transformation, lifting millions out of poverty and creating opportunities that once seemed impossible, turning a country once trapped in shortages, unemployment, and dependence into a laboratory of rebirth where reliable power is rewriting every aspect of life. Because for decades the absence of electricity strangled West African economies, shutting businesses early, crippling farms, and limiting education. But now with a smart hydroelectric grid, factories can run non-stop, schools can adopt digital tools, hospitals can operate modern equipment, and what outsiders might see as just electricity is, for Burkina Faso and its neighbors, the key to economic freedom. As every kilowatt generated sparks new businesses, longer shop hours, internet cafes in villages, and thriving trades like tailoring, welding, and carpentry, fueling growth not through aid but through self-sustained power. Industrialization is accelerating as Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal benefit from steady supply that keeps factories running. Local industries expand to process raw materials like cotton into textiles, and new sectors such as EV assembly, battery production, and renewable tech manufacturing take root, while regional trade flourishes with Burkina Faso exporting electricity to up to 15 countries, making it a power hub and strengthening political and economic ties. Over 1.5 million jobs have been created, not just temporary construction work but lasting careers, as young Burkinabe are trained as engineers, AI programmers, and technicians, supported by vocational schools and international partners from Cuba, Brazil, and Iran who mentor locals rather than dominate, ensuring skills and control remain in Africa. And socially, this revolution is just as profound as families switch from smoky fires to electric stoves. Children study by lamplight or tablets. Women gain time for education or business thanks to appliances. And clinics once lit by kerosene lamps now run 24/7 with vaccines, surgical equipment, and maternal care, reducing infant mortality and improving public health. While psychologically the nation is experiencing a surge of pride, as citizens see themselves not as aid recipients, but as builders of history, inspiring art, songs, and patriotism, as youth who once sought escape abroad now find opportunity at home. And Traoré frames the project as both economic and moral, declaring that Africa, long trapped exporting raw resources while importing expensive goods, is finally breaking its chains through energy independence, with every dam and every lit-up village symbolizing sovereignty. Beyond Burkina Faso, neighbors are drawing inspiration. Leaders in Mali, Guinea, and Niger plan their own renewable expansions, and the African Union views this as a pilot model for continental development that could be replicated with the Nile or the Zambezi, sparking a wider clean energy revolution, though challenges remain with relocation of communities, environmental risks, financial pressures, and the need for resilience against instability or disasters. Yet the momentum is so strong that, like the river itself, the project feels unstoppable, carrying the nation and its people forward into a future defined not by dependency but by defiance, innovation, and hope. The world does not simply applaud when a small nation takes a giant leap. It calculates, reacts, and resists. And Burkina Faso's $800 billion hydroelectric megaproject has not only lit up homes and factories, but has also sent shockwaves across global politics, transforming what many dismissed as an ambitious dream into a reality now taken seriously in boardrooms, embassies, and intelligence agencies. For more than a century, Africa's role in global economics was deliberately fixed to supply raw materials and import finished goods, keeping Western corporations rich and African nations weak. But by building dams of this magnitude, Burkina Faso is attacking the foundation of that system. For energy independence reduces the need for aid or IMF loans, allowing negotiations from strength rather than weakness, and telling former colonial powers that strings-attached contracts are no longer acceptable, turning the hydro project into not just engineering, but also a political weapon against dependency. The sharpest reactions came from France, Britain, and European allies, with France particularly wounded after decades of exploiting West Africa as its backyard, now finding itself sidelined while European media attempts to delegitimize the project by branding it financially reckless or environmentally irresponsible, which many analysts see as information warfare meant to discredit Burkina Faso before others draw inspiration. Behind the scenes, Western diplomats pressure Mali and Niger with aid packages to distance themselves, attempting to contain political ripple effects, while the U.S. faces a dilemma of publicly praising green energy but privately worrying about Africa breaking from Western financial systems, since a successful Burkina Faso could inspire others to reject U.S. and European loans, threatening corporations selling diesel generators or profiting from oil. China, having dominated African infrastructure for 2 decades, is both alarmed and intrigued, watching Burkina Faso diversify partnerships instead of relying solely on Beijing, which could weaken China's influence even as its firms compete for contracts in turbines, cables, and smart grids. Russia, however, embraces the project as a symbol of defiance, deploying engineers, celebrating through state media, and using it to strengthen security and energy partnerships while deepening multipolarity. Across Africa, citizens express pride and inspiration. Though leaders weigh ambition against risks of Western backlash, yet momentum grows as nations like Zimbabwe restrict raw exports and Zambia rethinks copper policies, signaling a continental shift toward self-reliance. More importantly, energy itself becomes diplomacy, with Burkina Faso gaining leverage by exporting power to 15 neighbors, redrawing West Africa's power map, and elevating Ouagadougou as a new strategic player once overshadowed by Nigeria's oil, creating unease among traditional powers. Global anxiety stems from the fear of a domino effect, where one nation's independence sparks others, just as past independence movements spread. So Mali, Guinea, or Tanzania may soon launch their own megaprojects, ending Africa's status as a playground for foreign corporations. Covert resistance is expected too, with risks of propaganda, sabotage, or political manipulation recalling leaders like Lumumba or Sankara, who fell after challenging foreign interests, a danger Traoré seeks to reduce by building diverse alliances with Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, and regional partners, spreading risk while pushing forward. In the end, Burkina Faso has rewritten Africa's role from supplier to builder, competitor, and power in every sense, political, economic, and psychological, showing that once people taste true power, they rarely give it back. The true test of a revolution is not in the first stone laid or the first light switched on. It is in the future it builds, and Burkina Faso's $800 billion hydroelectric project is not merely about generating electricity today, but about planting the seeds of a tomorrow so bold that the world will look back at this moment as the spark that lit up an entire continent, where by 2035 West Africa is transformed into a region of glowing skylines powered by clean energy from the Mouhoun River, high-speed trains gliding across the savannah, rural villages humming with computers instead of kerosene lamps, and hospitals saving lives without fear of blackouts. While education, healthcare, and commerce thrive on African-made power, what was once a cycle of survival becomes a cycle of innovation. With factories producing steel, electronics, and vehicles, tech hubs creating jobs in AI and robotics, and Made in Africa becoming a respected global brand, while the greatest transformation emerges in people themselves. A generation that never knew blackout nights, growing up with digital schools, startups, and African solutions to African problems, from Burkina students designing solar hybrids, to Nigerian programmers optimizing smart grids, and Malian engineers building irrigation drones, unleashing human talent. This future is also sustainable, with green cities of solar rooftops, vertical farms, and electric buses, while hydro dams fuel a blue economy of irrigation, aquaculture, and ecotourism, all sparking a ripple effect across the continent as Ghana upgrades hydro, Nigeria expands solar, Kenya invests in geothermal, and the African Union dreams of a power belt from Cairo to Cape Town. Globally, this rise reshapes power balances as Africa demands fair trade, better investment, and true partnerships, forcing Western corporations to compete and emerging nations to treat Africa as equal, retiring the phrase "sleeping giant" because Africa is awake, and at the heart of it all stands Captain Ibrahim Traoré, once dismissed as reckless but destined to be remembered not for megawatts, but for dignity and hope. Rewriting Africa's story from one of poverty and dependence to innovation, independence, and leadership, so that the world no longer pities Africa but respects it. With future generations learning not just about Silicon Valley or Shanghai, but about Ouagadougou and the Mouhoun River, and as satellites capture Africa at night no longer dark but ablaze with light. The message is clear. Africa needs no permission to rise, only vision, courage, and will. Because this is not just the story of dams but of destiny. A destiny where Africa no longer follows, but leads.